Did the Indiana Fever just shake up the entire WNBA? Fans are stunned, analysts are speechless, and Cheryl Swoops, well, she's not happy. The Fever just pulled off one of the biggest moves in WNBA history, signing elite talent to team up with Caitlin Clark. But this isn't just about basketball. This move has players, fans, and even rivals fuming. Why did DeWanna Bonner really choose Indiana over playing with her own wife, Alyssa Thomas? And how does this turn the Fever from underdogs to instant title contenders? Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner, for years, have been teammates at the Connecticut Sun. Okay, and also amazing, DeWanna Bonner's biological twin daughters. Again, let's break it all down. If you've been keeping up with the WNBA, you already know that Caitlin Clark's arrival in the league has been one of the biggest storylines in recent memory. She's been called a game changer, a ratings magnet, and even the future of women's basketball. And while some fans are excited about her impact, others, including some league veterans, aren't exactly thrilled with the amount of attention she's getting. And now, with the Fever making some massive off-season moves, things are about to get a whole lot more intense. We're talking about major players like DeWanna Bonner, Natasha Howard, and Sophie Cunningham, all deciding to join Caitlin Clark in Indiana. And if that wasn't wild enough, Bonner's decision to leave her fiancée, Alyssa Thomas, behind in Phoenix has set the league on fire with controversy. This isn't just about building a championship contender. This is about loyalty, rivalry, and how one move has completely shaken up the WNBA landscape. Let's start with the biggest question on everyone's mind. Why did DeWanna Bonner choose the Indiana Fever over playing with her own fiancé? Now, let's get one thing straight. Bonner wasn't forced to leave the Connecticut Sun. She was a free agent, meaning she had the power to go wherever she wanted. Most people assumed that meant she would follow Alyssa Thomas to Phoenix and help build a powerhouse duo with her soon-to-be wife. It would have made perfect sense. Thomas is one of the toughest, most dominant players in the WNBA, and adding Bonner would have instantly made the Mercury one of the scariest teams in the league. But instead, Bonner stunned everyone by deciding to sign with Indiana, a team that, just a few years ago, was stuck at the bottom of the WNBA standings. So what happened? What did she see in Indiana that convinced her to walk away from playing with her fiancé? Well, let's break it down. First off, let's talk about money. No one wants to say it, but the reality is contracts matter. And while we don't have all the details on Bonner's contract with the Fever, one thing is clear. Indiana made her a deal she couldn't refuse. The Fever had cap space, and they needed veteran leadership to help their young stars develop. They saw Bonner as the perfect fit for what they were building, and they weren't afraid to pay up. But it's not just about the money. Bonner is also reuniting with her former coach Stephanie White in Indiana, and if you know anything about basketball, you know how much coaching relationships matter. Players want to go where they feel comfortable, where they feel valued, and where they know they can thrive. And then, of course, there's Caitlin Clark. Let's be real. Clark's presence in Indiana is a huge factor. She's not just another rookie. She's already one of the most talked about athletes in women's basketball. And when you're a veteran like Bonner, you want to play with someone who can make your job easier. Clark's court vision, playmaking ability, and overall talent make her the kind of teammate that any elite player would want to join forces with. But let's not ignore the elephant in the room, Alyssa Thomas, because this has to sting. Thomas and Bonner weren't just teammates on the Connecticut Sun. They weren't just friends, they were partners in life. They were supposed to be the next power couple in Phoenix, dominating the league together. Instead, Bonner decided to take a different path, and while Thomas has been diplomatic about it in public, there's no way this decision doesn't feel personal. Think about it. Thomas spent the entire last season going head-to-head with Caitlin Clark, and it wasn't exactly friendly competition. Remember that viral clip where Thomas shoulder-checked Clark in the middle of a game? That wasn't an accident. That was a statement. That was Thomas letting Clark know, I'm not here to make friends. Now her own fiancé is joining forces with Clark. That's brutal. And the timing of it all just makes it even worse. Because let's not forget, Bonner could have joined Thomas in Phoenix. She had the option, but instead she chose to walk away. And here's where things get really interesting. Sheryl Swoopes is not happy about any of this. If you don't know who Sheryl Swoopes is, let me remind you, she's one of the greatest players in WNBA history, a 3-time MVP, a 4-time champion, a Hall of Famer, and she's got some strong opinions on the way things are unfolding in the league right now. Swoopes has been very vocal about how the Caitlin Clark hype train has affected the WNBA. She's not denying that Clark is talented, but she is questioning why so many veteran players are suddenly flocking to Indiana. To her, it feels like the Fever are being gifted a championship-caliber roster because Clark is bringing so much attention to the team. And let's be honest, she's not the only one who feels that way. There are a lot of WNBA players who have been grinding for years only to watch Clark step into the league and instantly become its biggest star. And now, on top of that, she's getting superstars to join her team. That's got to be frustrating for some of the league's longtime veterans. But here's the thing. Clark isn't doing anything wrong. She's not the one making these signings. She's not the one recruiting players. She's just being herself, a generational talent who's elevating the game. And if players like Bonner, Howard, and Cunningham want to join her, that's their choice. The real question now is, how will all of this play out on the court? Because make no mistake, the Fever look like contenders on paper. But winning? That's a whole different story. Super teams don't always work. Chemistry is everything in basketball. And when you bring in multiple big personalities, things can get complicated. There's no guarantee that Bonner, Clark, Howard, and the rest of the Fever will instantly click. They'll need time to gel, to figure out roles, to develop a rhythm, and you better believe Alyssa Thomas is going to be watching all of it unfold. Because if there's one thing we know about Thomas, it's that she thrives on competition. And you can bet she's already got the Fever's game circled on her calendar. She's not going to forget what happened this off-season. She's not going to just let this slide. She's going to use this as fuel. And when the Fever and the Mercury face off, it's going to be personal. The WNBA has never been more exciting. The storylines, the rivalries, the drama. This is must-watch basketball. And we're just getting started. Sheryl Swoopes gets furious after Indiana Fever signs star players to play with Caitlin Clark. This is sad, now that DeWanna Bonner has officially teamed up with Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. The WNBA landscape has shifted in ways that no one saw coming. It's not just about talent stacking up in Indiana. It's about the drama, the personal rivalries, and the lingering tension that's now simmering beneath the surface. And if there's one thing we know about sports, it's that when emotions run high, the games become must-watch events. Alyssa Thomas is at the center of that emotion. For years, she and Bonner were not just teammates but life partners, supporting each other through grueling WNBA seasons and pushing each other to be better. Now Thomas is left in Phoenix, wondering what could have been, while Bonner embarks on a brand new chapter with the Fever. It's one thing to lose a teammate. It's a whole different story to lose one to the very player you've been battling against. And let's not sugarcoat it. Thomas did not like Caitlin Clark, whether it was competitiveness, resentment, or just classic veteran versus rookie tension. It was clear that Clark's arrival in the WNBA did not sit well with certain players, including Thomas. That infamous shoulder bump during a Fever versus Sun matchup, that wasn't just a defensive play, it was a message. It was Thomas telling Clark, "You're not taking over this league without a fight." And now Clark has her fiancé on her team. The level of personal drama this adds to the WNBA's upcoming season is next level. The Fever versus Mercury games are no longer just about basketball. They're about unfinished business, lingering tension, and proving a point. Alyssa Thomas has always played with a chip on her shoulder. But now she's got a boulder on her back, and she's going to carry it into every single game. And that's not even the only storyline we need to talk about, because while all of this is going down, Sheryl Swoopes is making her voice heard. Swoopes has been in the game long enough to recognize when something doesn't sit right. And let's be real, she's not alone in thinking that the Indiana Fever suddenly stacking up this much talent is a little too convenient. Let's take a step back for a second. For years, the Fever were struggling. They were a bottom-tier team that had potential, sure, but no real path to championship contention. Then Caitlin Clark arrived and suddenly everything changed. It's not just about Clark being good, it's about her being a magnet for attention. Her presence alone makes Indiana a team that players want to join. And that's where things get controversial. Swoops, like many other former players, comes from an era where WNBA stars didn't have the luxury of instant media hype. They had to grind for recognition, for respect, for every single win. And now Clark walks into the league and not only instantly becomes its biggest name, but she's also attracting superstars to join her. Swoops' frustration isn't necessarily with Clark herself. It's with the system that seems to be bending in her favor. Think about it. DeWanna Bonner, Natasha Howard, and Sophie Cunningham all choosing to sign with the Fever within one off-season. That doesn't just happen randomly. It happens when a team suddenly becomes a hotspot for success. And some WNBA veterans are wondering, is this really fair? Because let's not forget, Caitlin Clark still has to prove herself. She's incredibly talented, no doubt, but she hasn't even played a full season in the WNBA yet. And yet she's already getting the kind of superstar treatment that's usually reserved for proven champions. It's frustrating for players who have been grinding in the league for years, watching Clark step in and instantly become the face of women's basketball. Now, is that Clark's fault? She didn't ask for this level of attention. It just happened. But that doesn't change the fact that players like Alyssa Thomas, Cheryl Swoops, and others are feeling some type of way about it. And let's be honest, this tension is good for the WNBA. Think about what makes the NBA great. It's not just the talent, it's the rivalries, the storylines, the personal beefs that keep fans engaged. LeBron versus Steph, Jordan versus Isaiah, Shaq versus Kobe. These rivalries elevated the league. And now the WNBA is getting a rivalry that could reach that level. Caitlin Clark versus Alyssa Thomas is not just a one-season thing. This is going to be a battle for years to come. Because let's be real, Clark isn't backing down. She's not the type to let veteran players intimidate her. She thrives on the big moments, on proving people wrong. And Alyssa Thomas, she's not just going to let this go. She's going to take every single Fever versus Mercury game personally. And you know what? That's exactly what the WNBA needs. More eyes are on the league now than ever before. The Caitlin Clark effect is real, and even though some veterans aren't happy about it, the reality is this is a turning point for women's basketball. So now the question is, how does this play out on the court? Because while Indiana looks stacked on paper, super teams don't always work. Chemistry is everything in basketball. And when you bring in multiple big names, egos can clash. What happens if Caitlin Clark struggles early on? What happens if Bonner and Howard can't find their rhythm? What happens if things don't click as quickly as everyone expects? This is the gamble that Indiana is taking. They've built a monster team, but now they have to prove that they can actually win together. And if they do, if the Fever actually pull this off and make a deep playoff run, then every single critic, every single person who questioned whether Clark deserved this hype, will have to sit back and watch the new era of the WNBA unfold right in front of them. And that's why this season is going to be must-watch basketball. The Fever versus Mercury matchups, box office, the veteran players versus the rising stars, a battle for league dominance, and Caitlin Clark, she's either about to prove her doubters wrong or give them even more to talk about. Either way, one thing's for sure, the WNBA has never been this exciting. So, what do you think? Did DeWanna Bonner make the right decision by choosing Indiana over Phoenix? And will this super team actually live up to the hype?